All right. Hey, if you guys can come up and move to this general area, that would be super helpful for us. If you're joining us online, we're going to get started here in just a moment. We have Ed from Missouri Right to Life, who's here with us tonight. He's going to share some details about Amendment 3 and its impact on the state of Missouri. So I'm going to pass out some handouts to you, and then we're going to get started here in just a sec. All right, Ed, if you want to come up here. All right, hey, I've just handed out a handout for you, but I also want to let you know at the door there are several additional handouts with additional information about additional things. So this is the handout that we're going to be covering tonight, but if you would like any of those other handouts there, you're welcome to have those as you leave tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I do have to say that this is kind of an adult topic in some of the things I talk about, so just to give you a little disclaimer of that up front. My name is Ed Grewach. I'm Legislative Director for Missouri Right to Life. Here to talk about Amendment 3. That's going to be on your November ballot. Missouri Right to Life was formed in 1973 in response to the U.S. Supreme Court mistakenly finding that there was a right to abortion in the U.S. Constitution. In 2022, the court corrected its error and reversed Roe versus Wade. But in the interim, 64 million innocent children were killed in their mother's wombs. And now, in November, there's a ballot issue to place a very broad right to abortion and transgender care in Missouri's Constitution. Now, the significant thing about it being a constitutional right is it is set in stone. It renders the legislature or the governor powerless to do anything to regulate either abortion or transgender care. Now, this particular amendment authorizes or creates a constitutional right for abortion during all 9 months of pregnancy. It eliminates parental notification or consent from any abortion or transgender procedure. And it requires taxpayer funding for abortions or transgender procedures. Because the proponents of Amendment 3, and often, unfortunately, the press, will like to deny that this amendment goes that far, I don't normally like to bore folks, being a lawyer, by talking about diagramming sentences and talking about the specific language, but we're really kind of at a point where we really have to understand how broad this amendment really is. Now, the handout the pastor gave you, what I'm going to talk about is this two-sided one. On one side, it says the truth about pro-abortion Amendment 3. Now, what you'll see in that box there is what all the voters are going to see when they go into the polling place to vote. Now, the law requires that there be a 50-word summary of every ballot issue written. And it makes sense because some of these ballot issues are 30, 40 pages long. So it really would be almost impossible for the state to reprint the exact language of every one. I think the sports wagering one is probably 12 or 15 pages. The one about recreational marijuana a couple years ago was about 30, 40 pages. So that's why you have this. Now, when it was first proposed, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft wrote a very accurate description of how broad this amendment proposal was. What you'll see, though, is the one written by the American Civil Liberties Union, because, unfortunately, the court adopted the ACLU's summary. So that's on this side of it. On the flip side of it is the actual text of the amendment. Now, talk first about the fact that it authorizes abortions through all 9 months, because there is some language you'll see there in paragraph 4, and you'll hear about fetal viability. And you'll also hear sometimes in the press, they'll say, well, that's normally at 24 weeks. But you really have to look down at paragraph 8 and paragraph 1 under that, where they define what fetal viability is. And the first point is, it's in the judgment of the abortion provider. They decide whether or not an unborn child is viable. The second thing you'll see in that paragraph is that it's on a case-by-case basis. So there's no set objective standard for when a child is viable. But probably the most important 7 words in that definition are the last 7, where it says, survive outside the womb without the application of extraordinary medical measures. Now that means a neonatal intensive care unit. Now the medical consensus is that any child born at 35 weeks or earlier needs to be in a NICU. So really what you're looking at on its face is viability means 35 weeks. And before 35 weeks, complete unfettered right to abortion for any reason. Now, if an unborn child manages to get past that barrier at 35 weeks or later, then the exception is what takes us all the way up to the 9 months to birth. Because if you go back up to paragraph 4, where it says the state can regulate abortions after fetal viability, it goes on to say in the second line, provided that under no circumstance shall the government deny, interfere with, or delay any abortion, where again in the judgment of the abortion provider, it's needed to protect the life, physical, or mental health of the mother. Now, unfortunately, every pregnancy presents some degree of risk. And certainly when you add mental health to it, every pregnancy presents the possibility of postpartum depression. Pregnancies can exacerbate maybe an existing mental health issue. So it'd be very easy for any abortion provider to sign off on any abortion right up to the time of birth. When we talk about eliminating parental notification or consent, you'll see in paragraph 2 where it talks about a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom. Now, person by law is defined as any living person. Doesn't say adult, doesn't even say women, which is a little curious because when you think about something that's being touted as a women's rights issue, you'll read the whole thing from cover to cover and you won't see the word woman in there anywhere. So person also means minor. So a minor has that absolute right, and anything that would delay or deny or infringe on a minor's right to get an abortion or transgender care would be unconstitutional if this issue passes. Now, when some people will say, well, I don't see where it says transgender care, anywhere in there. But when you read paragraph 2 and you get started toward the end of the second line, it says, it defines it as the right to carry out all matters relating to reproductive health care, including but not limited to, and then it gives you a list of things. So the amendment itself is telling you, no, it's not limited to abortion, it's not limited to contraceptive, it's not limited to respectful birthing conditions. And dozens of lawyers have analyzed this and came to the same conclusion, that performing a surgery on someone's reproductive organs does relate to reproductive health care, and therefore transgender treatments are protected or become a constitutional right under this. When we get to the issue of taxpayer funding, the Court of Appeals has already looked at this and has come to the conclusion that this will require taxpayer funding of abortion and transgender treatments. And the reason for that comes from paragraph 6 of the text of the amendment, where it seems a rather innocuous or innocent paragraph that says the government shall not discriminate against any person assisting another person in obtaining reproductive health. So the way the court looked at it says, well, Missouri, if you're going to provide any taxpayer funds for a pregnant woman who plans to carry her child to term, any kind of prenatal care, then you're going to be discriminating if you don't also pay for an abortion. The same is true with the transgender care, because if you're going to pay for, out of taxpayer funds, medical care for children, but you can't discriminate and say, but we're not going to spend taxpayer funds on transgender people. Now, that just doesn't, we talk about children in that context because I know that's something that many people are concerned about, but it really goes further. So if you're going to provide health care to inmates in a prison, you can't discriminate and say, well, we're not going to provide any transgender care to you as a prisoner. If you're going to provide any medical care to an illegal immigrant, you can't say, well, but we're not going to provide this type of care. The thing to remember is that this was written by some very smart pro-abortion attorneys. 18 months ago, when this idea on the pro-abortion side of having a ballot issue came up, there were probably about 12 or 13 different versions that were floating around. Some gave right up to the 12th week. Some had other cutoffs. Some had other provisions in them. And Planned Parenthood and every nationwide abortion rights organization all came out and said that they would not support any ballot issue that had any limits on abortion whatsoever. But now they're supporting Amendment 3, and they didn't change their mind. They just had their lawyers write one that had enough loopholes in it that basically gives them what they want, which is unlimited abortion without parental notification or consent through all 9 months, funded by taxpayers. The proponents of Amendment 3 have raised $30 million to spend. Missouri Right to Life has about $600,000. So you can see all the commercials they can run. You can kind of see the battle we're up against. And really what we have is the grassroots. We have folks like you who we hope will agree with us and be on our side. Talk to your friends and neighbors about what this, how broad this amendment is. Because sometimes I'll talk to people that maybe would favor abortion in some circumstances, but when I tell them how broad this is, a lot of times that will change their mind about that. Yes, sir.
So, how have we got
Yeah, there's been some effort to do some campaign finance reform. It's just never got anywhere, really. We even had an effort to do initiative petition reform. That's what this is, initiative petition. Because now all it needs is one vote more than 50%. So, and as we've seen with like the recreational marijuana, it only passed in 10 out of 116 counties, but it passed statewide because it got 70% in St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and in Kansas City, and probably about the same amount in Columbia, Boone County. But so that's kind of what we're fighting against here as well. And so the money is tough. And the other thing about the money is the proponents of this will lie to you. I mean, we knew it coming in because we saw it happen in Ohio and Kentucky and Kansas and other states where they tried this. And one lie is that women will die because they can't, because current Missouri law doesn't allow an abortion to save a woman's life, which is absolutely false. Missouri has an exception in its current ban that allows abortion to save the life or health of the mother. On the rare occasions where they will tell you that they'll acknowledge that Missouri does have that exception, they like to tell you that it's vague. So I'm again going to bore you by reading it to you so you can decide for yourself if it's vague or not. It allows abortions in medical emergencies, which it defines as a condition that complicates the medical condition of the pregnant woman as to necessitate the immediate abortion of her pregnancy to avert the death of the pregnant woman, or for which a delay will create a serious risk of substantial and irreversible physical impairment of major bodily functions of the pregnant woman. Because the other story they like to tell is, well, women have to be on death's door, they're bleeding out in the parking lot, and, before we can ever treat them. But that's just simply not true. Now, you hear those stories, but it's malpractice on the doctor's part. There's nothing that you'd have to change in the law to get the doctors to, and the doctors, this is very familiar language to them. This pretty much tracks the language that talks about a doctor's obligation in an emergency room to treat a patient who comes in off the street. So this is not only not vague, it's familiar to them. And it's ironic because really what's vague is the language in Amendment 3, which says abortions, if it's needed to protect the life or physical or mental health of the pregnant person. Well, what does that mean? I mean, a serious risk, any risk at all, and that's really the problem with that language. They will tell you that in Missouri, doctors cannot treat an ectopic pregnancy, and that's specifically excluded from the definition of abortion in Missouri. That's not true. They can. Circling back to viability, I like to talk about a fetus at 16 weeks gestational age. Now, I picked that age for a couple reasons. One, it's a fully formed human being at that point. It's got arms, legs, fingers, toes, got fingerprints, has all its organs in place, can recognize its mother's voice, and can feel pain. And I picked that age because they can now do surgery in the womb for children of that gestational age. And before they do the surgery, they give the child an anesthetic because science has proven that that child can feel pain. But this would create a constitutional right to kill that child. And I'll back off this a little bit, but abortion's a brutal, violent act. And the method to abort a child at this gestational age is one that I really would be reluctant to describe, but it's bad. Missouri, even before Roe versus Wade was overturned, statutes, very common sense statutes and regulations that Missouri Right to Life had promoted, had basically put the abortion business out of business in Missouri. Very common sense ones, like the requirement that a doctor have admitting privileges in a hospital near where the clinic was, the requirement of an ultrasound, the requirement that the mother look at the ultrasound. You're amazed at the percentage of women who go in for an abortion and see the ultrasound of their child and decide not to have the abortion. It's around 80% of those patients. Waiting periods, but this amendment, and so those really worked. We had a high in 1990 of 20,000 abortions in Missouri. We went down the year before Roe was overturned, and there were only 170. And that 170 was basically the emergencies that are in the current law, those things that just sometimes it is necessary, and the law does permit it. But all those regulations will be wiped out if this Amendment 3 passes. So, we don't have $30 million, but we hope that if you agree with us, if you'll talk to your friends, to your neighbors, to your family. I know they're uncomfortable conversations, but that's really what we have, this grassroots effort that we're trying to promote. Ask you to consider joining Missouri Right to Life. You can get on our website, just Missouri Right to Life. Just do Google search of it, you'll see it. Join us, only costs $10 a year. And we will then get your email and send you all the information updates as things develop over the course of the year. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
My question is, what about the money? Follow the money trail. If there ain't enough money in those coffers, it says so, it's going to come from guess who?
You talk about the taxpayer funding? Yes, I know. And I mean, that's especially when you throw in the transgender, aspect of it. But if we get back up around, 20,000 abortions a year like we had, and this is so broad that you're really going to turn Missouri into basically a vacation abortion destination, because people are going to be able to get abortions here. This will bring our law in line with North Korea or China. I mean, that's how broad their laws are. That's how broad this law is. So yes, it's hard to determine what that cost would be. Yes, sir.
How many other states have this on the ballot?
How many? Somebody know? 12, 14? Yeah. Yeah.
So Kansas is one of them, so they can just go right if it doesn't pass, they go right.
They already do. Illinois, of course. Illinois, I don't know how we got Illinois, but it's a very liberal state, and their laws are very liberal on abortion. And Kansas is. Now, Kansas was kind of the loss in Kansas that the pro-life movement had was the other direction. Supreme Court judges in Kansas decided that the Kansas Constitution had a right to abortion in it. So the Kansas pro-life forces tried to amend the Kansas Constitution to specifically say there is no right to abortion in the Kansas Constitution. That vote failed. There are three very conservative states where this vote has not gone our way. Kentucky tried the same thing as Kansas did, tried to make it clear in their Constitution there was no right to abortion. They lost. Ohio is probably the most recent one, a lot of you might know, and it lost pretty big, and it's a fairly conservative state, and so that's, but yes, for all these other states that are involved, I have a passing knowledge of it, but I've been so busy with this one, I haven't really kept up with that. Yes, sir.
I'm just going to tell you, it's called a talent. The doctor cannot refuse any pregnancy that's going to be life-threatening to the mother. He has to go back.
Yep.
So all these women that are out there screaming that they can get health care is an absolute law. It's federally protected.
Absolutely. I represented Lincoln County Memorial Hospital for 25 years. I'm painfully aware of that in federal statute, and that's what I was saying. This is some of the same language they have, and doctors have no trouble understanding that. And then you have these doctors and these stories of women. Of course, no women have died in Missouri since the ban took place, but from other states, and they'll say, well, we're just afraid, we don't really understand, this is too vague, and so that's their reasoning, but it doesn't really hold any water.
Who'd you say proposed this?
This amendment was proposed. It was kind of a combination of the American Civil Liberties Union and some other Washington D.C. based abortion rights organizations.
Has there been any states that this has been tried where they voted it down, like they have not amended the Constitution to say it is a right? I've heard that everywhere these have been pushed because of this big money, which we saw the advertisements just the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't understand how they don't have to disclose the money that is coming into the state to try to change the law that the people aren't for, right? They have no, so it's outside money.
Yeah.
How does that not have to be disclosed? I still don't quite understand. Is it just nobody cares?
Yeah, why they've never been able to really do any effective campaign finance reform, I don't know. But to your point, you can set up political action committees that you can hide who your donors are, and then they can promote an issue like this. See, abortion's $1 billion industry, for Planned Parenthood. So, they write this check with no problem. The day they opened their doors to start their petition gathering drive, they had $5 million. Just somebody in Washington, some outfit in Washington, unknown dark money kind of thing, wrote them a check, and Missouri Right to Life beats the bushes, works hard year round, and if we raise $1 million, we're lucky. So and that's $20, $30 at a time kind of thing.
So
Yeah.
you're saying abortion is a money-making business?
Oh yes, very much. Planned Parenthood likes to say, well, that's only 17% of our business. But what they don't tell you is that's like 80%, 75 to 80% of their profit, because all doctors, all medical people like to have something they could charge a lump sum for. So if you come in there for to get on birth control pills, or to get it tested for an STD or whatever else they might do, so they might do a lot of those and make $30, $40 a pop, but then they might make $400 to perform an abortion, or more, depending if it's later in the term. So it's a big money. It's a big money business.
There also was this was a couple years ago, an investigative reporter was able to, I think, record some abortion doctors talking about what was done after an abortion and how things were sold for profit, and that individual ended up going to prison, nothing ever happened. That's totally illegal. Nothing has happened. I'm very disappointed in our legislatures that they don't make it a point. They have the material. I mean, it's a documented thing.
Right.
I guess I don't understand how that's allowed. I guess the money is what's driving this.
It is for a large part. Now, part of it, when you look recently, over 50% of abortions are done by abortion pills. And during the Biden administration, it used to be, if you're going to do an abortion with an abortion pill, you had to actually go to a doctor's office, and you had to get an ultrasound, and you had to take the pill in the presence of the doctor. It took maybe 2 or 3 visits, and there were all kinds of safeguards surrounding it. But kind of in the name of COVID or whatever reason, they just took all the safeguards away. So now there are people that aren't even medical people that kind of set up a little cottage industry. You can just get on their website, order abortion pills, and it's really problematic because all those safeguards were there to make sure you're not giving an abortion pill to a woman with an ectopic pregnancy, or to someone who's too far along to really safely use that. And so yeah, that's but there's actually a federal law That's my meandering way to answer your question. Called the Comstock Act. And the Comstock Act says that it's illegal to mail any abortion medication or device across state lines. And the Biden administration just said, oh, we're just not going to enforce that. So there you go. So there's a different administration. Maybe the Department of Justice will take a different view of that.
That's ridiculous that you have a government entity, the executive branch, that decides to not enforce law that's on the books,
Right.
which is illegal. I mean, it's the common sense people, they don't understand how that's allowed.
Right.
If you have a prosecutor with enough backing, you would think, they could bring, some lawsuits, but I think the money thing has got
Yeah.
to be broken.
Well, that's like, you kind of touched on the thing with the marijuana being legalized. And, I have to suffer because where I live, because my neighbor likes to smoke marijuana every day.
Yep.
And our local prosecutor will not do anything. He's even told our chief of police that if you pull over someone for a DUI, and it's marijuana related, he will not prosecute.
Right.
He cannot write it.
So if this passes, what would it take for the next step to get it amended or taken off?
Well, the legislature can, there's two ways you can get on a ballot. One is the route they did to get the signatures. The other is the legislature can propose a constitutional amendment themselves. Then it would go back to a vote of the people. And so we need to get to the point, though, and this is really a goal of Missouri Right to Life, is to kind of change the culture. I always want to point out when I talk about this that really, and the reason I'm doing it, when I retired a year and a half ago and I just volunteer my time to act as legislative director because there's no sense in spending their money on me. They need to spend it on other things. But because this is an issue that God's given me a great deal of passion and clarity about, because life begins at conception. I mean, science tells us that. There's studies by the American College of Pediatricians, studies by University of Chicago, Princeton University. Really, any biology or embryology textbook you open will tell you that. And logic tells you that too. I mean, I was once a zygote, then I was an embryo, then I was a fetus, then I was a newborn, then I was a toddler. I mean, those are all, I'm this clump of cells that's 46 chromosomes, 23 I got from my father, 23 I got from my mother at conception. So life begins at conception. A lot of these arguments you'll see the other side giving. Michelle Williams got an Academy Award, and she gets up to accept it, and she said, I wouldn't have won this if I hadn't gotten an abortion. Okay, can't really argue that, maybe not, but you killed your kid, So, we have to get people thinking about that as an issue, really, and so where the legislature will go if this passes, I don't know. I know we'll be lobbying for us to go get right back on the ballot as soon as we can and try to get this either set aside or get it back to, I know a lot of states have had real good luck with a heartbeat bill, 6 weeks, because that, tends to appeal to people, and it is early enough that it will. If you go too far out with like if you allow it through 12 weeks, well, that's going to be a vast majority of the abortions take place, let's say in that 6 to 12 week time period. So it could be something like that we come back with, but right now we're just working hard to defeat it and hope we get there.
So on your ballot, it says including abortion and contraceptives. Why are they saying contraceptives will be?
Well, you're right. It's another lie they could tell, and somebody in our Lincoln County Right to Life group came in one day very upset because she'd heard a commercial saying that if you don't vote for Amendment 3, then your right to contraceptives will be taken away. And her two 20-something daughters were just really alarmed about that. But federal law, the U.S. Supreme Court has already ruled that there's a constitutional right in the U.S. Constitution to contraceptive. So as you go through this laundry list, and that's why I always like to make fun of respectful birthing conditions, because I'm not really sure what that is, but they throw all these things in, but really it's about abortion and about transgender care. That's really what it boils down to.
So legally, they're able to lie, and they can make it, they try to confuse the voter, but like that's been a blatant lie. And how is that allowed to be, how can you do that?
You know, that's a good question. There have been a couple other states, and I think Texas is the one that comes to mind, and maybe even Florida, where, because some of these commercials they run are just lies. I watched one the other day, and they said, it said, Missouri has no exception for the health of the mother. Well, I mean, it's in black and white. It's right here, I mean, it's not an opinion. It's not a, overstatement or anything. It's just a lie. But the question is, what could you do? By the time you take them to court, so I don't know. I think you're chasing, very elusive thing there, because one group says this, maybe get a court order to stop them from saying it, then another group says it, but they, every ad I've seen, they're always, it's all lies. It's all ignoring the fact that Missouri already has a life and health exception in its current law, and this is not needed to change that. Any other questions? Folks, I sure appreciate you having me. And again, hope you'll consider joining Missouri Right to Life, and hope you'll vote no on 3 and share that with your friends. Thank you.
All right. Like I said earlier, there's lots of different handouts. If you're interested in that, you're welcome to take any of those handouts you want, as well as I think we still have one more vote no on 3 yard sign. But right now, we are done for the night. If you'd like to stay, if you're normally in a connection group tonight, you're welcome to do so. We have connection group handouts. We can kind of spread out in the room if you would like. I know that the kids next door are still working through their Awana verses and plan to do so until about 7:45 tonight. So you're welcome to stay and hang out and walk through connection group guides if you'd like, or you're welcome to go home. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight.